Hello and welcome to our Foundation Stage Maths workshop. This workshop will cover the early learning goals for the children that they try and reach by the end of Foundation Stage. We go through both of those in a bit more detail and give you some ideas of things that you can do at home. So first of all, over to you to have a think about these questions. How do you feel about maths? Was your experience good at school with maths? How confident do you feel? What's your experience now? Are you presenting maths in a positive way when you speak about it to the children? Do you encourage maths to take place in everyday situations, like when you're out at the shops or when you're cooking? And do you promote its importance and explain why it's so important? These are the areas of maths that we teach the children. So we have a section called numbers and one called shape, space and measure. We teach the children via concrete and abstract methods. So with concrete, they're using actual objects, they're physically counting, they're using equipment. If we wanted them to do addition, we give them objects to do that with. Abstract is when they can turn that around and do it in their head without needing a physical representation. It's important to remember you always start with the concrete. We never rush ahead to the abstract and start using written numbers before they're ready to use them. With our number early learning goal, children need to count reliably with numbers 1 to 20, putting them in order and saying which number is one more and one less. They also need to add and subtract two single digit numbers and count on or back to find the answer. Solving problems and doubling and halving is included in that as well. So the first part of that is being able to count reliably. What does that actually mean? Children physically counting, so picking up objects and counting them. Children might be able to say numbers to 100, but that isn't really counting because they're not using objects. So they're reciting numbers if they can say those out loud. So counting is being able to pick up a pack of pasta and tell you that there's 14 pieces of pasta there. These are two examples of counting. So counting a given number of objects by pointing, touching, moving, crossing off, one number name per object, number names and correct order of number names, and holding the final number as a total. We do it really slowly because often children will skip ahead, miss numbers out, so we take our time with it. Or asking them to count out a specific number of objects. So I'm holding 6, can you show me 3 of those objects, and taking out the correct amount. Once the children are more confident with numbers, we move on to one more and one less. So it's for them to understand what numbers come before a given number, such as if we give them 4, they need to be able to tell us that 3 is one less and 5 is one more. We start with objects, get them to see physically how that is represented before we do a more abstract style where we're asking them in their head to understand, but also using number lines to support them in that as well. Then we turn our attention to adding. So for adding, the first step is counting all. So counting all the sets required, counting everything together. So I have a plate of 4 dinosaurs and another plate of 3 dinosaurs. How many altogether? And they physically count those. The next step is for them to hold one number in their head. So they can see that the first set has 4 dinosaurs in it, hold that number in their head, then count on 5, 6, 7 so that they have the correct answer. With subtraction, we have 2 sections as well. So the first one is taking away, again giving them physically an amount of objects and asking them to take away 2, for example, and count how many is left. And then we're counting back. So starting on a given number and imagining that they're taking away 2 from that number and counting backwards. We do it very much on the number line so they can see themselves moving backwards along the number line. Otherwise it's too abstract a concept for them to understand. It's quite a common misconception that with counting on and counting back, that to count the number you're already on. So if we ask them to add 4 and 3 together, they would count 4 as one of those numbers. So they need to learn to count the next number, and the same with counting back as well. But playing board games, anything like snakes and ladders with numbers will help to solve that misconception, and we do lots of that in school. We find that using number tracks, number lines are really helpful so that children can see the numbers in order. We often get out rulers, measuring, thermometer scales, anything that's got numbers on it so that we can imaginatively ask them to do counting on and counting back. So solving problems is a big part of the early learning goal, and we put out lots of things during Learning Zone for them to explore, finding different ways they can do things, going to a pirate shop and working out how much is each object that they need to buy. You can help with this at home as well, just playing board games, playing strategy games, encourage the children to handle money in the shop, talk about time, so what time is bedtime, how long is it until your favourite programme, talk about the calendar, and especially in the kitchen as well. The final part of the number early learning goal is doubling and halving. It's a little bit tricky for the children to understand, so we tend to work on it during the spring term when they've got a bit more understanding of number. So we use lots of objects to understand for them how to double numbers. They find that a little bit easier, but halving can be quite tricky, so we try and invent lots of different ways to halve things. So even when you're at home cutting the toast, I'm halving this piece of toast, how many pieces will you have? I'm giving half to your brother and half to you, how many sweets do you have now? These are just some of the examples of things that you can do at home. Obviously we wouldn't recommend being on a tablet the whole time, but there are some really good electronic games that you can get to support learning of maths. There's some examples of places you can go to find activities on the internet, and there's a couple of books there just to explain how we teach maths. We also have our booklets, our maths booklets for each year group, which are available on our website. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, then please speak to myself, Mrs. Parker, or to Mrs. Perrott. Thank you very much.